Hey guys, welcome to the Lunge and Lift podcast. Today we've got a great episode in store for you. Rob and I will be talking about how we got in the best shape of our lives. I think we're hanging on to it with a tight grip, wishing back the glory days. But I think if anyone's trying to get in shape, there's a lot of information out there about what you should do on paper, the sort of science behind muscle gain and fat loss. But we wanted to give you a bit more of a practical, real life account of how it happened for us. And if that's something you're interested in, hopefully there'll be a couple of surprising nuggets for you as to how our best aesthetic physiques arose. But before we get into it, as always, a big thank you to our show sponsors, thetrainingstimulus.com. Please check out the website if you are interested in learning more about movement mechanics. wit-fitness.com. Use discount code LL15 to get 15% off your purchase. And Hytro, use our discount code LL20 to get 20% off your blood flow restriction apparel.
Ash. So I remember we had the WIT social just after lockdown, and we was at TO CrossFit, was it? And I remember you taking off your top. I was like, God damn, God damn, you was in some serious, what most people will call shredded shape, and you looked unreal.
Thank you.
How did you do that?
Well, let me set the scene. I think the way we should go about this is, rather than just focusing on the sort of weeks and months immediately leading up to that prime time shape, I think it's important to consider the starting point, which there's obviously we've both been training for years and years, so there's a lot of foundations being laid like for a long time prior, but we'll focus on the year prior because I think that's most relevant, especially in my case. And I guess almost exactly a year prior to that, we had the WIT 30 challenge. And for those who haven't heard of the WIT 30 challenge, it's basically a body composition competition where we divided the gym into two halves, half focused on fat loss, half focused on strength and muscle gain. And you have 30 days to work in your little teams. Each coach would lead a team to try and achieve the best results possible by being strict on diet and having a bigger focus in training on those aesthetic side of things. And I had a strength and muscle gain group. And as a gesture of solidarity, I decided that I would get involved with them as well. And giving myself a pat on the back here, I actually ended up putting on the most weight in the month of anybody who did the challenge, because I was just like, I know about this stuff, so I'm going to apply the principles that I know properly. And one big caveat is that I used to be bigger when I was playing rugby, so regaining muscle I think is a lot easier than gaining muscle for the first time. So for that month, I actually reduced the sessions per week I did and the time per session as well. So I was doing about 3 or 4 sessions a week, about 45 minutes to an hour absolute maximum, but really focusing on going to failure and doing some drop sets, real Bobby Basic program in terms of there's a squat, a hinge, a push and a pull. So I would do maybe back squats, maybe rack pulls or RDLs, pull-ups, weighted pull-ups, and dips or bench press, just to hit the major muscle groups, and taking the last set to a really, really hard failure, and then focused on resting and eating. And what I said to my team was, this isn't really a training challenge. Most people who go to WIT already train well. We're just going to tweak the training to be more focused towards hypertrophy, like I just said there, like tempo as well, and really overloading muscles rather than just getting tired. But it's actually an eating challenge. Like the hardest thing to do with regards to hypertrophy is the eating. You have to eat to discomfort several times a day, and I don't think people appreciate how difficult that is for most people, to basically make yourself feel a little bit sick multiple times a day. And I basically put on about 1.5 kilos in the first 2.5-3 weeks. And I was getting a bit frustrated because I felt like I was eating loads, but I was doing it quite clean. I was just trying to eat what I normally eat and eat 500 calories more a day. So as it was coming towards the end of the month, I was like, right, I need to double down here. So I started just eating everything I could, and every single meal, just staring at these massive portions and not letting myself leave the table until it was done. And so in the last 10 days or so, I put on about nearly 5 kilos. So I put on over I think about 6 kilos in the month.
Blimey.
And I think, according to the body composition scales, it was mostly muscle, which I'm quite pleased about. But basically, that for the rest of the year, that muscle just sort of stuck around. It was quite. I actually wanted to be lighter because I was working on my. I don't know if I was working on the 10 strict muscle ups or the single arm pull up at the time, but I didn't want the extra weight. But even though I reverted back to my old training, I started adding in a bit of running. The muscle was just, because I think I'd had it before, it stuck around. So that was a nice foundation for when I actually did start leaning out, that I had probably a little bit more muscle than I had been carrying prior to that. Should we pause on me and switch to you? I remember your bodybuilding days and some of the photos I saw of you in, ridiculous bodybuilder shape. When exactly was that? And let's start with your 12 months prior to your peak shape, which was maybe your second competition, or I remember you saying that you went on holiday soon afterwards and you actually preferred the way you looked then.
Yeah, I mean, so like my bodybuilding shape was probably the leanest I've ever been, but the best shape I feel I got into was right before I went to Ibiza. When I went to Ibiza with some friends of mine and Hannah in 2018, like the closing parties of 2018 or 2017, one of the years. It might have been 2017 actually, and it was 2017. And for that whole, basically, what was really interesting is my bodybuilding prep. I dieted. Basically, as you said, if you're talking about the year prior, I had a failed competition prep. I didn't really get that lean. Just didn't look great. So I went all in on basically a full blown bulk, like you, but I didn't go say clean bulk. I just said, right, I'm going to eat whatever because I have a massive appetite as it is. I'm going to eat whatever, make sure I smash my protein. And I trained a lot. So I was training at least 5 times a week. Good lot of volume. I was doing a fair bit of powerlifting back then as well, because it was my time where I'd come out of a competition prep where I could then barely bench 60 kilos. I was like, this is bollocks. So I got straight back in, put load of weight back on, built a load of muscle, built a lot of my strength back. When I very first hit I did a little mini powerlifting competition at like the gym between like me and one of the other trainers, and it was like that was when I first hit my 225s, 227 and a half squats. That was a 500 pound, a 140 bench, and a full 250 deadlift or 260. It might have been 260 anyway. And like, so in that time I was working on strength, size, like my training was on point, my recovery was on point, because again, that age I'm probably about like 25, 6 ish. So, everything's in a really optimal state really. And I was really happy with it. Like, the recovery was probably the bit that I focused on the most. Well, the recovery and the hitting my protein. So that was like, I made sure I got good sleep. I made sure I always hit my protein. And being young, obviously had that little bit of extra testosterone floating around that body that was feeding the muscles. And then it got to January and I was like, right, I'm going to go for another bodybuilding show. So about 6 months, there was about 6 or 7 months. And then I said, right, I'm going to do a bodybuilding show. This time I'm going to hire a coach and I'm going to work hard. So I spoke with the coach and it was like, right, okay, going to give you 6 months to diet down. So I dieted slowly, essentially for 6 months.
Wow.
And that kept my training intensity high and stuff like that. And by the end of that prep, I was able to still bench. At the time, it was like 100 kilo for reps and stuff like that. So that was like my comparison of performance of not being able to barely bench 60 kilos at the end of the last prep compared to benching 100 kilo for reps against the program. But it was more of an ego thing, obviously being about like 26. So, but that was a real focus on, I did everything from like the steps, the recovery, the following the nutrition to a T. I had one blowout, which was someone's stag do, which we went on, and I knew it was literally at the halfway point. So I was at the halfway point. It was like all the food, all the drink, all the brownies, and it was an interesting time. But yeah, and that was good because it was like a little blowout halfway, and then I was got right back into the final 12 weeks to the show.
Nice. So I think, like, just talking about it now, I think the common theme for both of us was that we had a period of muscle gain at the start, and then it seems like the fat came off actually quite slowly. So you had a long prep, and I basically had a long, slow drop in weight as well, just because I was reverting back to my normal way of being. And I think, as you learned the hard way from your first show, when you try and go too aggressive, you see a massive drop off in performance, and you probably lose a bit more muscle as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of achieving your best physique, patience, I think, is definitely key. The slower you go, the more muscle you hang on to, the better you feel, the better you perform. But most people, when they're on a fat loss journey, probably want to do it way faster than is ideal. And I think it's a mistake I see a lot of people make, in that they go straight from a bulk straight into an aggressive cut, and a lot of the muscle that they've just built disappears very quickly, and they end up very similar to how they were before the bulk. Whereas if you want to actually change your set point, you actually want to hold on to that muscle. Having it like a maintenance period or a very slow cut is a much better strategy for looking better long term.
Yeah, and so like you say that slow cut, was that your approach going into after your essentially bulk, after WIT 30, after you spoke about trying to do your single arm pull up, and you was trying to lose the weight, but you kind of wasn't. So what was then your strategy kind of going in, and how did you get into that, what I remember as being like that TO CrossFit shape?
Yeah, I wish I had some photos from there. So basically, I didn't deliberately go after it. I basically assumed that once I reverted to my normal training and my normal diet, it would just come off me, because it wouldn't have enough food to sustain the extra weight. But it was very, very slow. So I think, yeah, without it being super deliberate, just over time, because intermittent fasting, so skipping breakfast. And I think as we move towards pandemic times, my routine has been pretty consistent for a really long time, to be honest, in that I won't have breakfast. I'll have a big brunch and a big dinner, and maybe a shake and a snack after training in the afternoon. And I just did that and stuck with it. And I think one thing that definitely contributed to me leaning out was adding more cardio. So historically, I've done very little cardio besides sports. I just always prefer lifting or doing calisthenics in the gym and using my gym time. But I started to get into running. I've spoken about it on a previous podcast. I think running is a great test of how well you move. If your body is functioning very well, you should be able to run pain-free. And I just thought it's a big hole in my training career, I guess, that compared to other things, my running wasn't really up to scratch. So started adding in just one session a week, maybe a little track session with some friends, maybe one slow run as well. And then as we got into the pandemic, I ramped that up. And because it was lockdown, if I wanted to go and do my calisthenics, I would have to cycle to the park, which is about a 15, maybe 20-minute cycle each way. So kind of unintentionally, I'd added about 30 to 40 minutes of zone 2 cardio almost every day. And on the days when I wasn't doing pull-ups or dips, I would be running, and that would either be like a 4 to 5K slow run, and probably every third run would be an interval session, like 10x4 or something like that. Coupled with the fact that obviously I had less workload given all the gyms were closed. So my recovery was probably better. My stress levels might even have been lower despite the world freaking out. And I think those are all more significant factors than I gave credit to at the time, because I wasn't trying to lose weight. I was just trying to get fit and get my single arm pull up. And then I think the other significant factor was I went from going out a few times a week, having meals out, having drinks and stuff like that, to unintentionally living like a monk because I was
Yeah,
just
yeah,
stuck inside making all my own meals and yeah, not boozing, getting more sleep than I've ever got in my life. And it was almost like a unintentional training camp. So
yeah,
it basically just fell off me over those few months from March to the summertime. And I genuinely didn't even really realize it until we were let out to see some people. And
like goddamn.
yeah, I remember I played tennis with Gus, and it was sunny, so we both had tops off, and it's like, monster, what have you been doing? It's like, what do you mean? It's like, I think this is the best I've ever seen you look. I was like, really? Wow, maybe I
Yeah,
am. Thank you.
yeah. What's fascinating about that is the fact that you didn't try, but it was the fact that you had a goal in mind of I want to be fitter, I want to do better at this. You're going to stick with some habits that you've been nailing, and you're going to eat well. And it's those simple things, and it's we I guess we always look for that secret sauce of like what is it that got you in that shape or whatever, and it does boil down a lot of the time to okay, just nail the basics consistently. And I think because we have such a mindset of 8 to 12 weeks to get something done, or even down to like say 30 days, like the great thing about WIT 30 is it's the starting point. It's the habit builder that kind of gets the ball rolling towards the goal that you want to achieve. And that was why it was so good, because it was like 30 days of either fat loss or muscle gain. And say you're trying to lose weight, you lose X amount in that 30 days, but then that journey continues and you carry on with it, or it doesn't for some. But like for most, that's the intention of it. It's not that you're going to lose all that weight in 30 days that you want to, but you're going to start it off. And looking at what you did over that lockdown time, where it wasn't then the sole focus of I want to weigh X or I want to look like that, is I'm just going to focus on that performance and focus on this. And it's just interesting that when you do focus on performance, and when someone finally gets that shift, you notice the body composition of normally what they want normally comes, because they're focusing on how can I do better, not how can I look better. So what do I not need to eat? It's like what can I eat, or what should I eat to make myself lift more, run faster, move better, those things. It's that slight shift in mindset, which there's definitely an appropriate time to think about things in that way. Like like for me with the bodybuilding show, cool. There was a goal to look a certain way. Even for when I was looking to go on holiday, it was right. I want to look like X from going on holiday. So they are two of my best shapes were when I had a set goal. But when I haven't necessarily got such a aesthetic goal moving forward, does then mean I need to look at what do I now need to change going forward, going into the new year and so forth.
Yeah, I think it's spot on there. And it's probably something I should have said is on the training. I think the one shift that also contributed hugely was being very strict on progressive overloads, because I had more time to focus on my training and I was training a bit more than previously. And I had these goals. I was working towards a 20-minute 5K run as well, which I never got to. Bitter. But I I was tracking every single thing that I did. So I was using my Garmin to track all my runs, so I could see what my zone 2 pace was, and I could see my weekly kilometers. So they were both ticking upwards. I was tracking because I basically was just doing a pull-up session and a dip session. Those were the only two lifting sessions I was doing. I had one main movement in each that I was trying to get up. So it was either total volume of dips that was constantly ticking up over time, or I was doing like heavy single arm pull variations, like trying to get as close to obviously a single arm pull up as I could, tracking the intensity and the reps and sets as well. So through that whole period, there was long, slow, steady, progressive overload. And whether it's a performance goal or an aesthetics goal, I think that's one of the fundamental principles, so that you're always nudging your body to adapt. And there is a distinction, obviously, between strength and size and whether you're building muscle, but they are linked. So if you are focusing on using your muscle, you're not going to lose it. Like you'd have to be doing something drastic to start losing muscle if you're strength training whilst in a deficit, a small deficit. And I think that was massive. And I imagine as you were doing your bodybuilding preps, you were applying the same progressive overload, like you were using similar movements and making sure that your performance was slowly creeping up. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, overall, there was a focus on my training kind of didn't go below fives. So when I actually got into the bodybuilding prep, so from January to June, um, my my lifts were 5x5s for the heavy stuff, pretty much always, and everything else was either like 8+, even up to like 30 or 50 reps. I was like doing big sets and like proper bro
Wow.
bodybuilding stuff, and it was awesome. Like I was really happy with the condition that I kind of got myself into, and the essentially the for me, I felt apart from then the 2017, so that was 20, I think 2014 or 2015, and then 2017. The two times I've kind of got into the best shape of my life, I think has been at a time where I've had just a real goal and a real want to achieve that goal. And the reason why I feel since then I've had some like failed, say, diets and failed body composition changes. It's just because like there hasn't been that want. It's a yeah. It's no, it's not right. There's been the want, but there hasn't been like the desire to do it. There hasn't been the real drive, because like big picture for me, I was a bit like training's feeling good, everything's feeling good. It's like, why is it I'm trying to obviously change this body composition? Is it to appease other people? Like, is it for social media stuff? Is that really my driver? And that was kind of
Mm,
where I felt this, like, over the years. Before, it was an internal goal of I want to look like X at a
yeah.
bodybuilding show because I'm competing. Just like with this powerlifting competition, I want to lift as much weight as possible. I will be in a competition, so I'm working as hard as I can this time to achieve the goal. Whereas for the holiday, I knew that Hannah and myself were looking to, say, have a kid at some time soon. We weren't like, that hadn't happened at the time, but I knew it's probably going to be one of my last big holidays. And I was like, right, fuck it, I'm going to get in the best shape I can. So I
Mm,
did that. And, you know, again, at the time, when I look back, I'm just like I preferred my shape there. So at my bodybuilding show, I weighed like 85 and a half, 86 kilos. Bear in
mm.
mind, I weigh 105 now.
Yeah.
So that's 20 kilos in
So
5 years,
much.
5, 6 years. But when I went to Ibiza, I weighed 92. And for me, that was like, for when I look at myself there, I'm like, that's good. That's where I
Yeah.
want to be. But this is also then where I now have this perception of myself, because when I look at myself of like, what do I want to look like, and I say, look, cool. When I would say that's I want to weigh around 92 kilos. I know if I got down towards 94 now, hopefully that'll be roughly what I look like. Hopefully back then at 92. So hopefully put on some size from then. But obviously that's not been the priority for a
Yeah.
while.
And from a dietary perspective, were you doing like a classic bodybuilding diet, chicken, rice, and broccoli 6 times a day, or how did you approach that with your cut?
With my bodybuilding show, no, I did have certain meals. Like I said, I followed a meal plan for most of it. And then, so with my coach, it was I followed the meal plan. After a couple of months, it was then I had like a 300 calorie free meal. So I could pick whatever I want. And then it got boosted up to, like I say, 700 calorie at one point. So it's like a free meal in the week. So once a week. Um, and that worked well for me. You know, when I look, because I was quite an early adopter of YouTube, I remember filming some of the videos. I was filming some of my prep, and like looking back, you know, making like protein fluff and protein this, and making all this volume of like protein things so you'd feel fuller. Like, it's amazing what I did back then. And that was when I got into walks, because I stopped doing cardio in the gym and started doing walks outside, listening to podcasts and stuff, and I really got into walking and that. But then the difference with my Ibiza prep was I was intermittent fasting at the time, so I wasn't having breakfast. And because I've always been a morning PT, so it was really easy to do. I'd work up until about 9 o'clock. I'd train, and then I'd eat. So it was always
Yeah.
perfect. I'd eat about 11:30 every day, and that was like I'd have like a coffee, and that would get me through. But so I was intermittent fasting, and I was tracking my macros. That was it. It was just purely hitting my protein and hitting roughly carbs and fats, but I was just mainly hitting my protein. It's kind of been a consistent over the years. That's what I've always tried to make sure. And I know you're pretty similar with that. Is in like when you are eating daily, is in like I might overeat, but I'll always make sure I hit my protein. Like it's essentially the building blocks, right? So that's what's essentially given me the ability that even if I am overindulging, as long as I'm training hard, I'm at least getting the right nutrients to be able to come and fuel and grow. And that is what I do that is what I do feel has helped me over the years put on the size that I have and get to the size that I am, including full mass.
One thing before we move on too far, I think a few listeners will know what's protein fluff. I've never heard of that.
Okay. Protein fluff was great. So this is, if you think back to say about 2015, around that sort of time where everything was quite new in the industry, everyone was making things, and like protein, like there was no protein bars were dog shit. Like you had like a Quest bar, which was all right. And you had like, I think Grenade had just come out with their first carb killer thing, but it wasn't really that great. There wasn't much. So there was a girl called it's like Anna something, but it's Protein Pal, and that was how what I remember. And so I bought the recipe book, still got it. And like, so what protein fluff is essentially, it was protein powder, xanthan gum, a little bit of almond milk, and something else. And frozen fruit, and you whisk it in a bowl. So what it does, turns into like Angel Delight. It's unreal. Oh, wow. It's so good, and I really want to make it again. And because I was then into dieting, like you get like this, like a salad bowl worth of like this fluff, which is about 200 calories, and it was so filling because it takes ages to eat, but it's just because it's so airy, just like it was filling you up. It was so tasty, and like. It'd be like a perfect nighttime snack, and like I should get it back out. I should make some because it was so tasty. And like, but then what I started to do after my prep, I still made it for a little bit, but then I put like cereal on top and stuff like that. And then this 200 calorie meal starts turning into a 600 calorie meal because of all my additions. But yeah, it was great, really, really good.
That's awesome. So the xanthan gums like. The
binder, the binder kind of, basically it binds the protein and the fruit and the bit of milk together, so it turns into like, say, not jelly, but kind of like jelly, Angel Delight, mousse, that kind of fluffy bulkiness. Oh, it was so good.
Great. That's awesome, mate. And it's just a slow, steady, calorie-controlled deficit.
Yeah, pretty much. I finished which I was actually really happy about. I think. Off the top of my head, I finished my diet on about 2,000 to 2,100 calories. So I wasn't even in like, I think. I'm pretty sure I remember not getting below 2,000, which compared to my first prep, which I've like, again, I just got into the industry. I've been in for a little bit, thought I knew what I was doing. I tried every single thing. I tried keto, fasting. I tried macros. I tried it all in a space of like 8 weeks. And so it wasn't anything. And then my training, it was just like, I had to do really high reps and this and that, and and all the cardio sprints. Like, no wonder my body essentially just deteriorated over those 8 weeks. But again, it's my learning experience. And I look back at the competition and stuff like that. I'm like, I still got in okay shape. It's not really stage shape of any sort. It's just good shape.
And how does it contrast with the Ibiza prep, like in terms of calories and stuff like that?
My Ibiza prep, I kept quite high. So I stayed around the 2,500, I think, the whole time. And I think it was about 24 to 2,500 the whole time. And I increased output. So that was I just did more because I didn't want to, because again, there wasn't then I need to be X weight, is I just want to look a certain way. And I was doing what I needed to do, and I was sticking to everything right, that it meant that I just had to think, I was like, okay, I want to lose a bit more weight a bit quicker. I'm just going to say do a bit more cardio because I had the time. And that's a massive differentiator between now and then. Was recovery is slightly different now to then, but also just my free time. And that is, I think, a massive underappreciated thing. Is like, you see a lot of time online of people saying, it's easy to lose weight, it's easy to do this. And it's like, it might be for a 25-year-old guy, but say for a 35-year-old guy, it's like, it's still the same principles, but there's other commitments now in their life and other restrictions and other things you can't just do. That is like, and your recovery probably won't be as good potentially. There's so many other lifestyle factors that come in that, yes, you can still do all these things, but they come probably at a bigger cost for something else that you then can't do because you haven't got that free time. Yeah,
awesome. And what sort of cardio were you doing was for the extras?
That was walks. I've kind of always, it's a steady state, low intensity, and like I did so much walking. That again, I used to walk a lot to the station, so my steps were like, going 15,000 plus a day. and obviously PTing. So it was like, you're up on your feet all day, and that was I'd go home and I'd get off a stop before to get those extra steps in. So I'd have
Yeah.
a bigger walk because I didn't feel I had time to. I didn't want to go home and go back out. So I just
Yeah.
got off earlier and did more walking back. So then I'd get
Nice.
that cardio in a better way.
I think it's a common bit of advice people give and hear, but not many people actually do. And it's when you're in a rush, you just think, oh no, I haven't got time to add 10 minutes to my journey. But I think that's another common theme. So if we have the common theme so far being like muscle gain quite far in advance, then slow fat loss over quite a long period of time. And I think the third commonality between us would be that we added in cardio, and the bulk of it being low intensity. Again, it's that gentle strip rather than trying to rip it off aggressively. The body is much more likely to let the fat go if it's happy. That's the way I think
Yeah.
about it. Whereas if you're trying to wrestle it off really aggressively, it gets a bit worried and it thinks, this is a stressful time. I don't want to hang on. I don't want to let go of this energy supply that's actually helping me survive. So that's why I think when people try to go really aggressive with their fat loss, it ends up biting them in the ass because they stress out the body so much that it actually resists. Very bro sciencey, but
Yeah.
anecdotally, both of us have experienced it, and I think we've seen it a lot with clients as well. So, good bit of advice for the listeners there.
It's the time. It really is. It's the giving yourself enough time, and it's funny because every time I've dieted since has always been I've never given myself enough time. So I've then tried to go too aggressively, and I've just given up. I say, oh fuck this. After about 2 to 3 weeks, it's always about 2 to 3 weeks. Everyone has that same point. They're just like, do you know what? This ain't worth it. And because my why wasn't strong enough, I was just like, yeah, it's not worth it. Whereas this time, coming into the new year, I'm following everyone else's trend of probably shifting a bit of timber, and I'm going to join in and see what I can do.
Yeah. So, what do you think you're going to do, body composition wise, training and food, and what's the plan?
Well, no massive changes per se, but I think I'm currently obviously in prep for this powerlifting competition, which is on the 3rd of December, and I've settled into the 100 to 110 kilo category. So it's the same category I was in my last competition, and I was sitting at 102 when I was 14 weeks out. And I spoke with my coach, and I was just a bit like, what do you think I should do? I have this thought. And he was like, yeah, I'd probably agree. And my thought was basically just settle and just try and lift as much as possible. I've got a kid coming in January or potentially late December. I was like, this is not a last hurrah because I don't plan on like that giving up lifting. But when I've had Chloe, which was like a lot of stress at the start with poor sleep and stuff like that. She now sleeps a lot better. My recovery is a little bit better now, stuff like that. So this is like the best time. I'm not building kitchens or gyms. It's like, I've given myself the best opportunity to lift the most amount of weight possible. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to settle into this category. I'm currently sitting about 105, which is the heaviest I've ever been in my life. And I'm just eating what I want to some degree. Again, hitting my protein, training hard, lifting heavy, and when it gets to the competition, as long I hit my numbers that I will hit my numbers and I want to hit, and then it will come to December, just like everyone, I think, have a little bit of downtime and enjoy the Christmas, because I'm off the booze now for the final 5 weeks because I did have a heavy one 2 weeks ago and it basically knocked out a week's worth of training, and I can't afford that again. So off the booze now, then coming to Christmas, probably be a little bit of booze as always, but still keeping my protein high and my training high. And then into the new year, it will be a nice low and slow diet of just like, and to start off with, it will be just don't eat like a pig. That's all I'm gonna do, and it's just because it's like, for me, it's like I like how I feel at the moment strength wise. That's all I feel. I've said this before in my last comp. It's like I feel great in the competition, like for powerlifting, but everything outside of that, it's just a little bit more. I run, I can feel a little bit of movement that I'm not happy with. I'm like, hang on a minute, there shouldn't be any bouncing going on anywhere. So I'm like, let's make sure that doesn't get too out of control. So yeah. What about yourself?
Keep on keeping on. I think I feel pretty good, sort of energy wise, and training's ticking along nicely. So I think I just try to make everything as efficient as possible. Basically, like keep my training sessions relatively short, feel good, feel strong. At some stage, I do want to tick off a 20-minute 5K run, but I think where I do that run training will have a big impact on whether I stay consistent or not. Because I just find it's not that fun to be logging miles in central London when it's cold and rainy and busy.
No.
So if I can find somewhere else to get in some more run volume, then that might pop back up on the agenda. But other than that, sort of nutritionally, sticking to intermittent fasting, just for me, the main benefit of that is focus. Like in the mornings before I eat, my brain works really well, so I get most of my work done then.
Yeah.
I think there's actually probably my training suffers slightly by doing that. But I'm willing to accept that trade-off for the brain function. But if I was to try and recreate pandemic shape, I'd probably do something very similar. And if I can rejig my schedule to add in a little bit more zone 2, then I think that would probably be the main missing piece. And I think frequency as well, because all the days were the same in lockdown.
Yeah.
That's another thing I did, was I didn't even think of days of the week. It was almost like an 8-day cycle that was just rolling continuously.
Yeah.
Like pull-ups, run, dips, run, pull-ups, run. Like one or two of those 4 runs would be interval session, and that just went on forever, regardless of the day of the week. Whereas now my training, I probably do 1 pull-up, 1 push session per week, and maybe 1 run per week.
But you play a bit more sport now and stuff like that, don't you?
Exactly. So squash is like an intense cardio session, which is most weeks. But don't do so much on the weekends, just because life is back online and there's other things to do than train. So I think I'm happy with that trade. Like I wouldn't, all things considered, if you take it as a full deal, I'd rather not be in the shape that I was in and have a bit more of a life than be locked up and just training 8 days a week.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear that, it does make me then think, as in like like I mentioned earlier, that if you don't have a proper why behind why you want to get in shape, because the sacrifices that it will take, you need to ask yourself, is it worth it? And like for me, since AI Beaver, all those sacrifices that have potentially had to be made, I've just gone, nah, it's not worth it. And don't get me wrong, there's sometimes I could have not had the pizza. Like, it just could have been. But and that's then laziness. But then the times going out drinking. No, exactly. Like, but I've had a lot of times out since then, and from drinking and stuff like that, and it's been great, create good memories and so forth. And it's like that doesn't mean you can't not drink and you can't not eat pizza if you want to get in shape. It's just, I think, understanding how frequently, or having a more intentional thing, like the fact when I said about my bodybuilding prep, I was essentially on a meal plan, and then I started to get 3 meals in the week, like once a week. So rather than like what people used to call it, say, a cheat day, it was just like, say, just a free meal of whatever you fancied for dinner, rather than having what was on plan. And on plan doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a strict, say, nutritional plan from a nutritionist, but it's just like you have what you eat daily, and you stick to that. You stick to some simple principles. And I think that's something that you've been really good at over the years of, say, knowing yourself, as in seeing your consistent daily habits not change much. And it's that means that when you want to make a change, you can make one little change and see what the impact is, rather than what most of us do, and I'm including myself in that, is then we go into then a different state. We change a bunch of things at once and then see what happens. And it's like, but this is why I said for me in January, my main change will just be to not eat like a pig. So, and not eat boxes of cereal and stuff like that. And just stick with some, just eat as I am, and then see what happens. And then when things start to stall, then make a change, and understand that I'm planning more like the summertime, rather than by March I want to be in X amount of shape in 12 weeks.
Yeah. I think that's a good lesson. And I really agree with what you were saying about being aware of the costs. I think having been in better shape than I am now and knowing what it costs, it makes it easier to be not bothered about it, because I know the trade-off. I know that it's a sacrifice to social life, and you have to dedicate a lot more time to training. And right now that's not the priority. So I'm almost happier to let it be. It's like you hear
Yeah.
those rich people talking about the cost of making all their money, and they've sort of ruined their life chasing money, and it's easy for them to say because they've done it. It's without being too self-congratulatory. It's similar to that in that I now know what it takes to get in that shape, and I can make a more informed decision as to whether it's worth it. Whereas I
Yeah.
think if you're just starting out, you're not very aware of the experience of being in that shape because, like everyone says, it doesn't change your day-to-day life. It's not like you suddenly feel amazing and, you know, life is just on easy mode. It's a marginal gain. You get a
Yeah.
couple of compliments, but beyond that, your day-to-day experience is very, very similar. So if you're enjoying your life, it's actually far more important than being in your best ever nick all the time.
Yeah, best ever Nick, I guess, is obviously, as we've said, is very individual, and we've all had different experiences of that. But if you are unhealthy and you feel unwell or you feel like shit, then you do need to make sacrifices. You do need to make
Yeah.
these changes. And like as we kind of alluded to a couple of times in it, there are multiple ways to skin a cat for getting in shape. But a lot of the principles that we've spoken about of controlling your calories, like I kind of don't want to say all these simple points because we there are the simple points that we speak about all the time, but I think just to reiterate, calorie controlled diet, so just eating a little bit less than what you are currently doing if you're out of shape, making sure you're probably trying to reduce your alcohol to either none or just a little bit here and there. Reduce your meals out because again, you just don't know how much extra shit they're putting in your food, and you can control more. And if you want to say eat out, maybe try and just do it on say 1 day a week or something like that, like I mentioned about that free meal. And recovery, make sure you're training hard, try and sleep well and hydrate, get yourself outside, go for some walks.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, the walks. Like in terms of things that people probably aren't doing that are surprising big wins are just increasing low level activity. Everyone talks about NEAT,
Yeah.
but we've both said that was actually one of the key things that's different then compared to now was that low level activity was much higher in terms of training and stuff. Overall, it wasn't hugely different,
No.
but those extra few hundred calories you're burning a day just from walking more or cycling more really do add up over the long term. So
Yeah.
listeners should pay attention to that.
Because you see it all the time, is in we go all in on like the high intensity stuff, we stress our bodies, and that we want stress on the body because we want to have to adapt. But if you're not fueling it, that stress does then become quite detrimental. As Ashley was mentioned at the start as well, your body doesn't want to just say, right, here's all this fat and muscle to essentially burn off. It is a bigger cost for your body to do. So when you constantly stress yourself with say high intensity stuff, your body's like, fuck, what am I doing? Give me something, give me help. That's why then throwing in that low and slow stuff, going out for walks, maybe doing some zone 2 cardio type thing. Your body's like, as you say, to in easy mode. It's cool. Okay, here you go. Here's a little bit of fat. Here's a little bit of fat. You're just giving a little bit. And it feels like you're barely doing anything. And I think the getting off at a station early on the way home, like I get it on the way to work, it might be a bit more time dependent, but maybe getting off a stop or two early on the bus or the train, walking home, getting those extra steps in, because once you get home, you're into family mode, or you're home and you've got shit to do, you have dinner and stuff. So maybe delay that 15 minutes by getting off a little bit earlier and walking home a little bit more. Massively helped me, and as you said, it helped you. So I think we hope that overall you kind of been able to kind of pull out some little nuggets. And if you do want some help, obviously we've had quite a good few nutritional episodes in the past with Liam from PH Nutrition, where we've spoken about muscle gain, fat loss, calorie fucking deficits, is vegetables bad for you? Which they are, apparently. So
Is meat bad for you? It's not.
Is meat bad for you? There we go. So we've had all these things kind of come in the past. If you do want to know some more detailed nutritional chat, go to one of those episodes. You can find them on our YouTube and obviously on our podcast page. But if you do need a little bit more help or you have any more questions, you can reach out to us on Instagram at lunge.lift. Shoot us a message there and we'll be sure to get back to you. But we hope you enjoyed today's episode and you did enjoy it. And hope you did enjoy it and you did enjoy it.
Double enjoyed.
I hope you really enjoyed it today. I did. Anyway, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.